Hey, welcome all. Thanks for joining us again for Bits and Books. I'm Marnie Stockman. So previously on Bits and Books, this is episode 2 now. We read the first half of Patrick Lencioni's Getting Naked. And many of our friends that are on right now were here last time. So Ray Orsini and Jason Slagle and Chris Dix and Lisa Papp were on last time. And we have us joining today, Brian Kelly. So Brian, want to say hey and introduce yourself?
Yeah, excited to be here. I've been active, I guess, in the MSP, ConnectWise community for about 10 years. Started as an engineer and, started doing service leadership. And I love these conversations. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we are excited to have you here. So last time we talked through the first half of the book, which is sort of a fable, a story about how a consultant had to go into another consulting org because they'd acquired them and learn what they didn't know about one part of their competition. A piece of that was everybody kind of took away homework from what they learned of that. So I was a high school teacher, so I'm going to ask everybody how they did on their homework. This is the accountability portion of of Bits and Books. Yeah, Jason's like, what did I say I was going to do for homework? So I'm going to remind you what your homework was and see how we did. So, Chris, you had said you're kind of in startup mode. One of the things we talked about last time was the notion of bad revenue. So last time we talked about in the book, the Rising Star Consultant Group was talking about the fact that they didn't accept bad revenue. They weren't going to take any client. They weren't just looking for money for the sake of looking for money. So Chris, you said you really wanted to reflect on that idea of bad revenue and look at your clients to see, is this something that's happening to me? So did you do your homework or are you making it up on the spot?
No, I did do my homework, although I appreciate the reminder because I needed it. No, but I have really tried to take that into account, take it to heart, looking at new people that new customers that have showed up over the last few weeks, as well as one particular existing customer who I think is trying to take things in a direction that it doesn't make sense for me for the product. So I'm trying to have a gentle goodbye with that particular customer, but it's really helped me, I think, to start to focus on what my ideal target customer is, and I'm pretty sure that that's smaller shops than I thought it was before. That those are really a good fit and helping out. So it's something I'm gonna have to keep in mind because it's a struggle, and I know we're going to talk about some of that side of it today. So.
For sure. Well, and it's interesting, they talk about having a focus, and the same folks who maybe are bad revenue can pull you from your focus, which can distract, which is a threat, especially in the IT world where any new thing looks like an exciting new possibility, right?
Oh, and I'm so susceptible to that new shiny thing. I really have to fight that
No one
all
else
the
on this
time.
call has that problem at
Oh,
all. You're
never.
the
I'm
only
sure.
one in the community that has a bright shiny object syndrome.
What? I was busy. I was distracted by something shiny.
So because of that, I'm going to remind you of your homework in case you forgot. So previously you were chatting about your new merger, and you said you were really diving into billing questions.
Yep.
And thinking about value over profit.
Yep. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So sounds like that homework's ringing a bell then.
It is. We had our leadership quarterly yesterday and had like an hour-long conversation about the why all of us do this. And it really resonated, to hear everyone's whys. Our leadership team is pretty well aligned with it. And the conversation then turned to how do we get our employees to understand our whys, right? Because part of my why is this, right? Like it's the MSP being successful allows me to be relevant in a wider scale and allows us as a company to, expand outside of just the local clients we serve. And I think that's lost on our employees sometimes.
I went to a sales annual kickoff for an MSP in Florida, and they had everyone in the room go around and say their why, right? All the employees in the room say their why. And then he put up slides of their clients' whys. And their whole story is, right, we take care of the technology so you can take care of your why, basically, right? And it was really interesting to show. He put up one of his slides was a letter from a woman, a matriarch of a family that owned, I believe it was a country club, who her husband had passed away. And this company took care of creating the memorial slide deck for him. And she said, like, that's not your job, but you took care of us in a different way so I could take care of my family. And I've always felt like I get the support from this company. So I think the why is important and interesting, which is interesting that you picked to talk about the why, because Lisa said that her homework would be to take time to talk about her why. So did Jason did you cheat and did Jason do your homework for you, or did you also do your homework?
I did my homework. My why of what I do started when I was very young, and that is my dad. He took me into a NCR data center, and I couldn't stay home because I would get in enough trouble, but I was too young. And it just took me forever and a day to figure out my path. I did go to college, and I was torn to either go into medical, my mom, or go into computer science, my dad. Well, I chose both. I actually was on my 5th programming language and said, that's it. I've had enough. I'm not going to be sitting behind this box for 8, 10, 12 hours a day like my dad did. So I went and played. I went into sports medicine, graduated, never used the degrees, went off and did my own thing. And 3 years before I got separated from a multi-billion-dollar company, 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and couldn't get to sleep. So I designed a business card and I threw it in my desk and went on my happy way. And 3 years after that, I started CSN because that company separated me. And lo and behold, as I was cleaning out my desk, that business card was in the back, and I pulled it out. And guess what the name of the business was? CSN. And I go, okay, just like usual, I'm always ahead of my time.
Yeah.
And when I pulled my car in, it gets to my dad because he restored classic vehicles. And when I pulled my car in because he did do maintenance on my Honda, I was standing in front of my door and he goes, Lisa, where's the oil and stuff? It's all right. So I stepped away and he goes, you're working for a computer company. I said, Dad, here's my business card. I'm the owner of the computer company, and thank you for showing me that light. My why started then because I wanted to be able to service small, medium-sized businesses with the same quality of tools that the enterprise got, because I knew that they were more susceptible. So my dad was my why. He passed away June 8th of this year as I held his hand and he took his last breath. And I said, Dad, thank you for giving me that light. And I carry it today. My business is 11 years. And when I read this book, I go, I'm doing this. I'm not a salesperson. And truthfully, I'm not. I'm a consultant. Yeah. Because I'm going in and saying, what are you doing? I'm asking those questions. I'm getting to know each client because of their business, their personality, because 9 times out of 10, what they do is why they have issues. What they do is why they're in trouble and they can't focus on their business. And that's why they need me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can help them deliver their outcomes with technology, right, you're supporting their why all along the way. And it's interesting because you kind of ended that with hearing the stories of your clients, which is a bit how this book was written, right? It starts as a story. So kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about, although A+ on everybody for doing your homework. So well done. Everybody watching on YouTube is like, okay, she's not as bad a grader as I thought.
Yeah, what a beautiful why,
maybe
right?
I will join live.
Reason to start your business. I love that.
So the beginning of the book was written as a fable. There are quite a few of those out in the world. I think the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the 5 a.m. club, raving fans, etc. Super curious. And Brian, I'm going to start with you because you're the one that reminded me of it. What everyone thinks of that format of a fable in a grown-up business book.
I struggle with the format quite a bit. For me, I'm so used to, I want the sources, I want the facts, I want the data. So when I read that and I kind of go through that experience, it seems a little bit like a made up experience, even when it resonates. And so I worry, is it confirmation bias? Of course I agree, because I've had that experience. So for me, it kind of ties into having a reading group like this. It's super helpful for me to reflect on whatever fable that's being shared, whatever point is trying to be made, with others that also have similar experiences. So it's, for me, it kind of validates it. I have to get over that confirmation bias to really get something out of the material.
I almost forgot. So Ray, your homework was crunchy versus creamy peanut butter. So I'm curious how your day is feeling. Are you a creamy or crunchy peanut butter kind of day today?
I'm struggling with this because I'm definitely a crunchy peanut butter kind of guy. And in making, my Ninja Creamy recipes, like that's what I'd like to use. But as Jason knows, in the fitness world, the weight loss world, there's PB Fit. And PB Fit is only creamy or powder. To which, yes, I've gone to great lengths to actually make it crunchy by adding some crushed peanuts of my own.
Yeah, it sounds like
Because I'm that kind of special. I'm just saying.
got a level. So how do you feel about fables?
I love fables. I absolutely adore them. One of my favorite, not business books, but one of my favorite Buddhism books, the Tao of Pooh and the Day of Piglet, are also fables, using A.A. Milne's characters. And whether it's was it Traction that was also fable based, ish, right? And Go Giver is also around.
E-Myth, I think, has some fable parts in it.
Yeah, I love those kinds of stories because they make them more relatable, and I'm sure you could take this from the classroom, right? It's very different talking about history that occurred as versus talking about stories in history.
Oh my goodness, I would have liked history a lot more if my history teachers gave me some.
Yeah, math doesn't seem to get the same love when you do stories around it. Like Train A
you'd be
leaves
surprised.
Ohio from.
Train doesn't leave Chicago.
Yeah, train doesn't leave Chicago. That's exactly right. Nice, but boom. Chris, how do you feel about the fable?
It's funny. I don't read a lot of business books. This is one of the first I've ever actually read.
Well, this is how they all roll.
Yeah, so I just so I kind of liked it. I mean, in the sense that I'm used to reading mostly other kinds of books, fiction, or technical stuff, and this was some sort of weird mashup of the two that I was, it was a good introduction for me, I think, to the concept. I enjoyed the first part of it, but I wouldn't have wanted it to not have the follow up with actually reviewing everything. So so I don't know. It's a learning experience for me. I'm going to be interested in seeing how it compares with the next ones we read.
So it's interesting. I find, so I like Malcolm Gladwell and Jim Collins, and a lot of those books are really dense because it is content. And so I can only read, like, I can't just read it casually, right? I always have a pencil anyway, and I'm scribbling in my notes. Here's these are my pages of notes in Getting Naked. But it's easier for me to listen and walk, on a fable type, because the story lets you walk away with the big idea without having gotten bogged down in the minutia of every little conversation. That said, Jason Slagle, I did listen to Raving Fans, which I know you said is on your list. And honest to goodness, the reader, I thought it was Elmer Fudd reading me the story. It was the first fable that I'd ever read. And I was like, is this some kind of joke? Am I supposed to? But I end up, I recommend that book all the time. So you read this when you're in on Raving Fans. In general, you like the fables?
Yeah, if done well. I've read a couple, and I was trying to think of a couple that I had listened to or read, because I do a mix, that just hit flat for me. I think my present favorite is still Phoenix Project, which, even if you're not doing DevOpsy stuff, if you're in IT support, you should read or listen to the Phoenix Projects, because it is a very good fable that talks a lot about our fallacies, about Mythical Man Month and all the other things that go along with IT support that people tend to knee-jerk react.
I will have to judge, being way outside of DevOps.
It's still a good story.
No, it's a great story for even just problem solving, like even just logic breakdown, which is why I love the book so much.
Now, logic, I'm all about problem solving in that. And Lisa, how about you? Fables, yay or nay?
I am for fables. I find that that's the best way of learning. You hit the nail on the head when you said when it has something, it carries you forward. And we read enough technical, whether it's newsletters, whatever it is, we read
Oh,
enough,
knowledge-based article.
all kinds of stuff. And I feel that as a person who has a learning disability, especially when it's put in a format like this, it sticks, it adds value. And that's the one thing I got. When I was finishing this book, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on the right path. I am doing something that's unique and different that's going to make CSN and myself stand out. And it makes all the sense because I don't like to be sold to. Give me the story, learn about me before you start throwing numbers and stuff. And I, in fact, called a client. This is one thing. I called a client last night and I said, can I come back and redo my initial interview with you? And he goes, why? And I said, I just have something I'm missing. And he goes, sure. He says, but I'm not going to do it tomorrow because it's Friday and we're closed. I said, fine, pick a day. And I'm coming back next week. And I said, can you please have these two people in the room? And I'm going to try this on him. And I think this is going to actually solidify why I'm better than what he already has. And he's an IT person on top of it.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I'll be curious. You can side note, do your homework for next time on that one.
Okay.
So we mentioned the fable piece. The first 150 pages of the book were fable, but it takes like 60 minutes to read. Maybe I really did read it on a walk. Now I take long walks, but I had read the first portion. And then the second portion, he sort of goes into specifics about the learning that he had done in the fable part of it. So there are three. So in the chat, for folks that can't see this chat, Jason's put, I think Atomic Habits and Checklist Manifesto are examples of where fable is better. Checklist Manifesto, for sure. I've read that one and I'm trying to picture what that would be. If not, it would actually be a checklist on a checklist. It'd be like a page and a half, like take 10 notes on what you need to do. Done. And then you wouldn't get the why behind it or the meat behind why it's impactful. So I think you're very right about that. So the second half of Getting Naked is about the three fears of kind of when he boiled down what the consultants were really doing. And one of the reasons we picked this book first for the MSPs is because, like Lisa said, you really are consultants, right? MSPs really are business consultants using technology as the tool to help solve problems. So it was interesting to watch a business consultant who was not an IT provider in the book talk about the three fears that he concluded. So they were, don't be afraid of losing business, don't be afraid of being embarrassed, and don't be afraid of feeling inferior. So Chris, I wanted to start with you and ask you to give your take on the fear of losing business piece.
Yeah, that was probably the part that hit home for me the most with the three fears is having been, I spent most of my career as a consultant, like a software developing consultant. So coming into an organization and trying to sell myself and services. And it's a challenge to, not be afraid, especially when you're starting out, when you don't have six figures sitting in a bank somewhere and you're just trying to land that first client. Yeah, hungry. And so you're willing to do pretty much anything to get the business, but that's different than the fear issue. Like fear is not a bad thing. And that was one of the things I thought about as I was reading the book. Like fear can be healthy, but acting on fear is where the problems come in. Like to not let that fear make you make the wrong decisions, short-sighted, thinking about short-term revenue versus, how am I really going to help this customer, this client, and make a long-term relationship. And part of that was, I think the book did a good job talking about giving away the business, and thinking about ideas. Like ideas are cheap, right? Like, to come in and say, oh, look at the problems and talk to them about it. And it's the execution of those ideas that I think somebody in a consulting role or an organization, MSP, that's where the real value is not in coming up with this 5-minute solution. If that's all they needed, then fine. That they you've
You
given them what
probably
they
weren't going to
needed.
sell them a big managed service contract anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about the execution. So if you've got an idea and the ability to execute on that idea, then that's where the value really comes from. And just hearing Lisa's story about her father, it made me think about I spent some time recently home, hadn't been home in years, and spent some time this past weekend with my family, my father. And he's one of the things I most respect about him is he sort of lives fearlessly, like just for better or for worse. He's a bit of a character, but I really admire that about him because it doesn't hold him back in certain situations that it's always kind of held me back. And so I'm especially after hearing your story, I'm going to try to live more fearlessly like my father does, for better or
what
for
are
worse.
some things that you're holding back from doing if you are like, what does it look like to be fearful of losing the business? What's happening differently in a business? Anybody that has thoughts on that?
I think when you're a fear of losing the business is your reputation, because that one person that you lose the business, whether it's because of a not working or it's just opposites don't attract, that's what they say, because we always in our minds we think, well, if we do a good job, that person knows 5 other people and that knows 10 other, grows. But it's the reverse reaction, is that if we don't do a good job, they're going to tell 5 people, and you see that I think that's where we think of first thought is our reputation. It's not really the bank account excuse me, bank account as much, it's our reputation.
I think Warren Buffett said it takes 20 years to make a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And if you think about that, you'll do things a little differently. And that may be could live there. Jason's like, yeah.
Yes and no, right? Like you would think with all these cyber incidents we've seen recently, companies like SolarWinds would just be gone, right? Like, so it's. I would challenge people to realize that the reputational damage, people are going to be really loud and grumpy at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they feel like you've slighted them. But that fades really quick, and the long evidence on Wall Street over and over again is shown that reputational damage is pretty hard to actually make permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, how many of these are people, like how many times can we nail down and say, because I screwed up, my reputation was harmed this way and I actually lost this specific business because of it? I've yet to see an actual factual explanation or example of that. To me, it's much more, and don't get me wrong, Jason will tell you, we've had some hiccups over the last couple months. It's more about letting down our, the people that are your clients or partners or whatever, however you call them, letting down your staff. That's far more deleterious, in my opinion, than any harm to reputation. Just the fact that Comcast still stands today lets you know reputation really doesn't do, or GoDaddy. It doesn't have the same impact. It does for those people you've let down 100%. But as far as the business impact, I'm with Jason. I see too many of these. I mean, we still get Reddit posts every week of, should I still use LastPass? Right? I mean, you'd think after 7 issues in 10 months, that would probably be a no, but people still do. So I would qualify it. You know what I mean? I'm not saying anybody wants to tank their reputation without question, of course not, but I would qualify it in the grand scheme of things. And you're probably trying to avoid whatever led to that. And that is important. The reputation is just a byproduct. But I agree, still don't do. My daughter told me best when she was growing up. She said, don't do anything that you're going to have to apologize for later.
Oh, my dad's growing up, he raised me on don't be sorry, be right.
Yeah.
Say,
yeah.
if you don't do anything wrong, you're not ever going to have to apologize.
Right.
And I would say at the same time, like, everybody's going to make mistakes. And as far as reputations go, I've seen it a lot lately, having conversations with MSPs, that owning your mistakes and working to make them right, is an important part of your reputation, and how you handle the mistakes you make and own it. and try to work to fix it, I think goes a long way.
What was
The other
the line from Nolan's Batman? It's not the mistakes we make. It's not that we fall. It's how we get up.
Yeah,
Howard
very much.
Carter.
I
And
think
tying back to the fear piece, the examples we used where it's easier to bounce back are organizations that have a scale that gives them some security. And one of the things in the MSP space, it's not quite this simple, but a lot of the decisions are not being made from a place of that security and that scale. So right or wrong, because I think it applies just like Jason and Ray were talking about, but it's not necessarily so secure of a position. Even a large MSP, except for what the top 3%, top 5%, are still small organizations with a client base. They should not necessarily have those fears, but it's easier to go to that fear place when you're thinking about the reputation.
one of the things that I thought about with fear of losing business is when I was first a customer success manager in an ed tech company, I had a $1.4 million contract client. And I know that because they reminded me of it every single time I met with them. Right. And it was, we pay $1.4 million, so it should do this. We pay $1.4 million, so it should do this.
That's not obnoxious.
At one point, I grabbed the person that reported to the budget owner, and I said, do you want me to have this conversation with her, or do you want to? Because you paid $1.4 million for this product, and she keeps dreaming of what else it should be. And you haven't even used what it can do. So you're becoming a distraction for us. And I need you to concentrate on the fact that why don't we use all $1.4 million of it before you telling me what else? It's not like things were broken, right? And for sure, he went and had the conversation because I think I would, but he had it with her, and I never again heard that. And the focus changed to let's focus on maximizing what we have. But believe me, that was my first job as a customer success manager, and it was our company's second largest account. So there was fear in me losing the job, but at the same point, we recognized it was becoming a distraction for the company, and that was, going to be a bigger risk type of thing. So we had to kind of put that fear of losing them aside. The next question is fear of being embarrassed. That's almost, to me, it's almost worse than losing a client. Like I can deflect like fear of losing business, but being embarrassed, that one mortifies me. So what does everybody think of that one?
Yeah, I tell my staff all the time, like I work really hard not to be wrong in most situations. So having to apologize for stuff like drives me nuts, especially when it wasn't me, but I'm ultimately responsible. But yeah, it's that fear of being wrong, and that worries me more than
in the
anything.
book. He talked a lot about like asking stupid questions was kind of a key to that. Like how do you feel about that?
I love asking stupid questions.
I think Jason just posted about this the other day, so I know how he feels about this.
Yeah, I'm all in on that. I mean, to me, so we go through this with staff onboarding, right? Like much like you, I can imagine the people you hired at Lifecycle Insights had never worked at Lifecycle Insights or a QBR company before, right? Sorry, I know QBR is a triggering word for all of us, but so it's very much with VoIP, right? We'll hire people that were not in this industry to begin with. And one of the first things I tell them on day one is you will hear a lot of acronyms. You will hear a lot of things that people will talk to you like you should know because you work here. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I'd rather hear, I don't know, can you explain that a little better, than assume you know what I'm talking about, take it back to somebody else, parrot what they said, and then sound ridiculous to the next person. Then you got to go back and say, can you explain this? Because we really didn't understand it. That's far worse to me than just saying, I don't know. Please explain this to me, or tell me what that means to you, or how this impacts you. Ask exploring questions. It's fine. I perfectly am happy to embrace being dumb. The day I know everything, like I'm done in this world. Like the day I know everything, that's
right.
No goal.
Yeah. So they also recommended, making dumb suggestions. And sometimes, so if any of you are Ted Lasso fans, he said I should never bring an umbrella to a brainstorm, right? So which is a favorite. I had one boss he would just put his hand up, and his philosophy was like, flags up. He would say that. And if the flag was up, no stupid ideas, right? So you actually encourage, it's kind of like a bracketing conversation.
Yeah.
When my husband will say, don't worry, the new tractor I want isn't $100,000. Like, that's just his idea of when he tells me it's 40 that I'm not going to balk. I was like, no, don't go bracketing me. So sometimes throwing dumb suggestions out there opens the brain, right, to other ideas. So I think that's a bit of what, like, don't be embarrassed, because you may, in fact, you can't solve the problem with the same brain that created it. So how can asking some unique questions maybe open?
I think too, a lot of business and a lot of marketing comes down to take your ego out of it, right? Like, if you feel it's one thing to try to always be right, and that you think you're doing the right thing, you think you've gathered enough information, you're making intelligent, educated choices. That doesn't mean you always have to be right with other people. I would rather get the right outcome for whatever situation we're in. So you have to be open to whatever you think is right is still possibly wrong. And trust me, as probably, I don't know, in this group, we have a lot of loudmouths, but, so I won't take the title there. But as somebody who's constantly very vocal and speaking strongly on my own opinions, it doesn't change that I know I could be wrong and I need to hear somebody else's. And honestly, I invite it when somebody else says something I may not have found. I think that's great.
I love debate, right? So like we do the Idea Thunderdome, where everyone comes to a with their idea, and we debate the merits of them. And I expect everyone to feel strongly enough about their idea that they're willing to defend it, right? Like, and they're willing to go to bat for it, because if you don't believe in it that strongly, then you're not confident in it, right? And it's just going to get mowed over quickly. But that comes with the fact that not everyone in that room is going to be right? So like, you've come with your best idea and you're willing to defend it, and you're just flat out wrong. So you have to quickly get over the whatever. Like, it's just, okay, faced with this new information, the answer is different than the answer I previously gave. There's nothing embarrassing about that.
So let me ask something there, because that's actually something, I had this exact conversation today with somebody, talking about, that's my thing. Like, and especially it was around word usage, right? Like, I will have a conversation with somebody. I feel that we should have a good argument for each side, or a good conversation, each side arguing their points. Now, if I say argue, Marnie will, and probably Jason will say, yeah, the dictionary definition, absolutely correct word usage.
Yeah.
The inference or the connotation most people on the other side will get is, we're arguing, we're being combative.
That's exactly.
Yes. And it goes very much like, I feel the same way as Jason is. I think long and hard about the things that the decisions I make before I make the decisions. One of my favorite sayings is from Oppenheimer: genius sees the answer before the question. It's not about being clairvoyant. It's about preparation. It's about examining all possible sides. And so I expect the other person to be able to defend their side graciously as well. Now, when I say defend and side, you have the same problem you have with argument, in that now they feel that they have to be on the defensive, and not every personality type is going to be vocal about those things. They're going to be like, well, I'm not willing to go to bat for any one thing, period. I'm just not going to have the conversation, because they feel they're just keeping the status quo. So you got to be careful with that.
You do. Yeah. So unsurprisingly, on the disc model, I am a heavy D, right? Like, so with a mild C and a little bit of an I, right? So like, unsurprisingly there, I struggle with S's and I's, because they struggle with that skill.
Yeah, same.
I put in the chat a book. It's called Think Again by Adam Grant. So this is what I think about Think Again. First, I listened to it in audio, and then I had to buy the darn thing in paper and hardback, because I liked it so much. I wanted to read it again, buy it again, and take notes on it. But it really, I think Jason really gives some strategies about how to help for the S and I's, right? Because like, I know 100% that I could come to you and you would give me blatantly honest feedback. And if I hated it, we'd still be friends at the end, right? Because that's who you are. So I love having people that I know, I trust, to give me honest feedback, because I don't need people blowing smoke. This book also has some great strategies for how to not make it combative. And then the other piece is how sometimes if you can start closer to them, you can actually bring them further in viewpoints. So this may sound bizarre, but I babysat a ton. That probably doesn't sound bizarre. But when a baby would start screaming and I couldn't figure out why, I would cry back with it, like, and it would kind of look confused. And then I'd like start whining less, like, wah, wah, until we kind of were talking and like, all right, now that we've calmed this thing down, was it a diaper or food, right? Like, how did we get there? So anyway, think again reminds me, yes, I suspect that I am. I haven't taken the disc. I've done a lot of Myers-Briggs and the other ones, but I've had more than one person tell me that I'm INC. So
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I've done the meowing back to cats, but that was more from it's a fun time to see their confusion, not as a de-escalation technique. So I will try that with humans. That sounds really good.
well, I bet you have tried this, and I'll be curious for those of you who answer support tickets. When people come in a support ticket, they're coming in hot with a problem, and the wrong answer is like, you don't really have a problem. It's not a big deal. Like that makes them insane unless you de-escalate them. So if you can come back with, that must feel horrible. I'm so sorry. You feel like that. I get that. That doesn't feel good at all. I hope I can help. Then they're like, okay, they've acknowledged that I'm allowed to be hot about this. So Lisa, do you have thoughts on, like, you come in hot right back at them, with them, not against them?
Well, it took me a long time to understand that it's easier to use sugar than vinegar. So, kind of this, when I get client hot on the phone, a lot of times when I get an email, it's all in translation. So I actually call the client and say, okay, what's going, I got your email, and then they just start, and I just let it go, and then I'm the calm one. I'm going to try and take that rip current out. I'm going to be the calmness. Okay. And I go, it's not to antagonize them, but it's asking those questions. Okay, well, the typical one is, what have you been doing? Yeah. No, I just go, what have you been doing? Let me log in. Let me take a look. Show me. Okay. And I say, oh, I see you're working on this. It's not a distraction. Again, asking questions. I'm asking. And when I get to a certain point and say, oh, okay, I believe I see what you're doing. You know what? Why don't you take a coffee break? Go take a, do you have something else to work on? And Notorious say, well, yes. All right, well, go and let me work on this. Let us work on this. I'm the calm one. And even when I have a client just blast, it's behind the screen. Yeah, I'm getting aggravated. I'm about ready. I'm going to come through. But I find that when I'm the calm one, they calm down. And then when they calm down, then their brain cells open up and go, I go, oh man, Lisa, I'm sorry. I just bothered you for 5 minutes. That was so stupid. I said, you know what? I do that all the time.
Right? You listened and de-escalated it by the listening. You didn't come back at them at like,
right.
No, you're wrong. Right. I'm sure you've done something stupid. I was thinking like, that's not the way.
And I'll observe it. I say, I've done the same thing. I sit behind screens. I have, I'll get click happy too, and be like, okay. I said, there's one thing you can always do. You can give me a call, stop what you're doing, give me a call, and we'll work it out. I said, at least it's not smoking. So I wouldn't tell you to pull the plug. When it starts smoking, pull the plug, get the fire extinguisher, then give me a call.
And we'll figure it out. It's interesting because when they're calling you as the expert because they're having a problem with technology. And the third fear that Patrick Lencioni talked about was the feel of feeling inferior. And I don't think anyone in the IT space feels inferior about the technology conversation, but I often feel in those QBRs or in prospect meetings that if you're going to a lawyer, a dentist, a manufacturer, whatever, that there could be some feelings of inferiority because they're experts in their field. And Patrick Lencioni encourages you to not be afraid of feeling inferior And my initial take on that is like, well, I want my lawyer to be better at law than I am. So like, I should be okay with that. But what was your take on that section of the book?
So it's funny because the way that related to me, or I related to that situation, was more about the imposter syndrome side. So I'm fortunate enough to be in a very great group of peers and friends, many of you included, that are literally experts at what they do. Like there is no question, it's publicly accepted expertise in certain areas.
Yeah.
So this is not like I think they're good. This is like
Yeah.
the world accepts
Yeah.
that they're good,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, with the exception of certain CEOs of certain antivirus companies, not many would argue security against Jason Slagle, right? Or client success against Marnie. So, you know, that's kind of my point. So like, you know, I have all these people that are, you know, at the apex of their careers as far as, you know, their position in that expertise. And so it's not very different from going to a potential client or going to a client that's also ideally, you know, you want the high performers, you want the rock stars, you want the ones that are going to generate a lot of revenue to have you around for a long time. So I completely get that whole, I belong at the kiddie table right now, I'm at the adults table. I go through that all the time, regularly. But I will tell you, it doesn't hurt to, I'll pull from Grey's Anatomy. Feel free to pull my man card if you want, but I'm a Grey's fanatic. But one of the characters talks about before she would go into an operating room, she'd do her superhero pose. And it was just to get her worked up a little bit, like, I'm also, you know, the shit. I'm also pretty badass. I deserve to be here. And I think we all need to do that every once in a while to recognize that we also deserve a seat at that table. And to them, they might see us as that, and you want them to see you as that, because like Marnie said, you want the other side to see you as somebody who knows what they're talking about, as the best at their thing, but you're also the best at your thing, and don't forget that.
Yeah, I don't do a superhero pose, even though I have the t-shirts and cape for it over there. But I do have like a little, you know, intro music type thing. Like I'll listen to, you know, play a little short
you get
playlist.
some walk-on music, some Back in Black.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it's a whole mix, man. It's you got to have something like that, right? You got to have your whatever it is that gets you very good. Definitely. Definitely.
I am in my happiest place when I am the dumbest guy in the room, because it means I'm learning the most.
It's actually going back to that. Do you remember, it was IT Nation 2018 or 2019? I think it was 2018. And it's you, Matt Clark, the original founders of Huntress, Chris,
John, Kyle.
John, yeah. And so they're there, and we had a few other people with us, but you were geeking out with Chris or John about like J-tagging and Pokemon Go.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And I was I understood individual words, but how they fit in the context, I was lost.
Yeah.
And we're drinking at the time, because this is at the bar, because that's what you do at a bar, right? And so, but I remember just watching the conversation and being just enthralled in it, mostly because I had no idea what the hell they were. I knew what they were talking about, I just didn't have those experiences. And it was great to sit there and listen and be like, cool, I'm exposed to this new thing. I love it.
Nice.
I genuinely seek out those opportunities. Like this book club, right? Seeing what your takeaways on these books, you know, I enjoy that very much.
Semi-retirement, I went and got Tableau and SQL certified, because I was like, I need to get a little more of this language.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of my hobbies are exactly that. I just started pilot school with a buddy, and then also with another buddy, we're doing Duolingo, and learning Italian, and like lots of stuff like that. But and even that, I get competitive. I have to be at the first place every single week. And
well, if you're doing Duolingo in Japan, you better watch in Japanese. My son's out to get you. So
as I'm getting higher and higher, like I'm realizing there are other people that do exactly the same thing, and looking at their strategies it's kind of crazy. But I love that. I love anywhere that I don't feel comfortable. Right, that's what it ends up being today.
So I'd love to hear everybody's sort of one takeaway from this second half of the book before we vote on next month's reading. So does anybody have something that they particularly want to work on, or really, I mean, sometimes it's nice to just have the inspirational poster in your office that already said what you believed, and this book happened to repeat it. What's everybody think?
There's some of that, right? Like the why thing for me is, has been like really going in to evaluate that. But like a lot of what they say to do in the book, we already do. I am trying to ask more dumb questions intentionally, just as a way to check my own understanding, right? Like to make sure, right? If I ask this really dumb question and I get a different answer than I'm expecting, then clearly there's a disconnect here we need to meet through. But I already believe this book really resonated with me because I really believe in the concepts behind it already. Yeah.
Well, then I would ask, is there anyone on your team that would benefit from it? Because like, if they don't know you, you can be an intimidating force with the directness, right? And so if someone else read it, would they say like, all right, you know what? Jason allows himself to ask dumb questions, so I should allow myself to ask dumb questions of Jason, even if I'm going to get a comment. Like I'm not going to be afraid of feeling inferior. I'm going to ask the question.
It's important. It's one of those things that like we do over here where, I require everything to happen in a public channel. I'm vehemently against DMs. Obviously, private information, personal stuff, of course. But my view is every conversation we have, somebody else can learn from. We can harken back to it. We can, reference it, whatever we need to do. And that has a ton of value, more so than just writing DMs. Now that does require that you're not afraid to look stupid. And it's not that anybody else thinks you look stupid. It's just our natural, innate human being nature means if we don't know we're smart people. If we don't know the answer to something, it must be because we're not smart enough. Then we feel stupid. Psychology sucks. Blame Young. But, getting past that leads to enrichment for everybody involved. And so you kind of have to we do that today, teaching people to not be afraid to ask the quote unquote dumb questions. But yeah, I think this book would probably we just did Radical Candor. I think this is probably a very next one we're going to read in-house definitely for our managers, at least.
Yeah, I had my team most of them just read the Ask and Answer. This will probably be next. Yeah.
Nice. Lisa, anything as a big takeaway on this one, aside from what you kind of already were?
Well, actually, it's interesting because I finished it last night and I was back reading it. And my chiropractor, who happens to be my client, called me and she's just la, 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 la on a couple of things. And I started instituting a little bit of the consulting thing. And I said, you know what? I said, I'll be seeing you on Monday. I have a present for you. And I'm going to be giving her a copy of this because where she's going in her business, she needs to be the consultant. But she is, as they say, that level of intelligence that she always says to me, I'm going to be asking you dumb questions. So I'm going to flip it on her and start asking her, even though I have the medical background, I'm going to start asking her dumb questions.
Yeah.
I don't feel there's ever a dumb question. I learned that lesson at 17 when I went off to college. I graduated of high school of a class of 16 and my largest class was 12. My smallest was me. And I stood in an auditorium, my chemistry class one day, in the middle of the auditorium of 150 people, and I was jumping up and down to get the teacher's attention at that time. And he turned around and he says, do you have a question? I said, actually I have 3, but you got to go back 3 boards. And everybody in the class just looked at me and he just shook his head and I went, okay, but I have these questions because I can get where you're at. I also had in calculus, when I took calculus 1, 2, and 3, I loved my teacher for 1 and 3. Was the same person. I did not like the teacher in 2 because he taught theory. As he says, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. I hate using that. There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, but there's more than one way to get from point A to point B. Google's a perfect example of that, or Waze, whichever one. So that's how I look at it. It's never a dumb question. You're just inquiring. And I felt stupid a couple of times, but you know what? I just laugh it off and say, well, it's because I didn't know the answer. Doesn't mean you didn't know the answer.
And I'm laughing at Jason's comment. What did that poor cat do to Chris? How about you?
Yeah,
And
so
then you needed to find multiple ways to skin it. That's even like worse.
yeah, for me, it's I think thinking more about the fear and trying to live, not let that factor into the actions that I'm taking, but also talking about like working with customers, talking to people, recognizing that when you get that support ticket, that's somebody's coming in hot and heavy, that's fear on their side, like and recognizing that and trying to relate and help them through that by not meeting it with bad energy. So just trying to recognize that fear is okay, panic is not.
Fair. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, I think mine is definitely in the fears and the losing the business category. The seat that I've sat in for so long is, I treat it as a math seat, that we're doing math problems and we're trying to solve an equation, but that's not it. And certainly I'm great with our clients and can deliver, but there's a lot of self-talk that has to go into it, and it's not the first instinct. And I just want to work with that, because none of what we do is going to work if we're not incredibly, radically, to kind of steal the term, client focused. They've got to be happy, and we've got to engage in that way. And that's absolutely for me what it is. So it's not a process anymore, that it's natural.
Well, one thing that you said triggered the thought that in this space, what is right today may be wrong tomorrow, as best practice really should be about better practice, right? Like Jason Slagle, what he was saying 10 years ago, if he preached the same security stance from 10 years ago, today would be like, oh, like, can I extract that from all of YouTube? Like, did I say that 10 years ago? Because today that wouldn't pass, right? And so one of the books that I just read talks about, like, you're a whole new body every 10 years type of thing. And so this space humbles you in that regard, because you never get to just stand on your principle in that it is always going to be right. Because in fact, a new threat actor is going to be able to find a new way in around that, and you're going to have to do something to work on that. So I think what you said there, Brian, kind of triggered that for me in terms of the way you work. And I also read, it really shouldn't be, maybe they shouldn't be called best practices, but better practices, because we really do always need to rethink, et cetera. So I enjoy these chats. I literally could talk these books all day long. And because of that, we want to pick our next book for October 27th. So I'm going to put in the chat, and I think Simon's got it on the banner.
Yeah, Phil's got it up. Yep.
So Phil, great, all the humans, the support network, the amazing people that are making this happen, so we can just sit and chat. So if folks are watching, would love to, we're gonna chit chat for 3 more minutes while people take this poll. And then so you can do one of 2 things. You can vote on one of the 5 books that we had preceded from a spreadsheet that we'd started earlier, or you can add your own. And then Ray, my question for you is someone able to look at the tallies on the back end so we can state the book for next
absolutely.
time?
Phil's got that. Whenever you're ready, we can get that if you want to give it a few minutes. What about whatchamacallit? What about you guys? So what books have you added to or wanted to add to this list? Because I know that list right now is not all the stuff we want to have.
Oh, no, not all. I just figured I'd start with the ones that I had heard, quite on the list. Yeah. What is everybody else reading that they like?
I'm
Brian?
doing Who, A Method for Hiring by Patrick Lawler. I, as a company, well, my companies all have very strong culture, and I do that on purpose. And the bigger you get, the harder it is to keep that culture. And it's not so much of we all look the same, talk the same kind of thing. It's more about we have similar priorities, and we have similar beliefs in how to have affect good customer experience or service delivery or whatever it is. So I'm always on the search for ways to motivate and keep my employees, but also how to hire great employees. The culture code, drive, excellent recommendations too. So
Jason, you just held up Crush It, was it?
Yeah, Crush It's good. Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I couldn't see who the author was. Now I absolutely know. Yes.
Yep.
Lisa put in the 5 a.m. club, own your morning, elevate your life. I'm a
Yep.
member of the 5 a.m.
Same.
club. I know.
Oh,
you
yeah.
I'm
do,
not.
right?
I can't.
No.
I'll get there someday. The problem is you can't be a member of both the 5 a.m. club and the 1 a.m. club.
I am. I'm not recommending it, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely am.
Yeah, I bet you Ben loves that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no comment on that one. But my thing,
Talentpreneurship, for anybody that hasn't picked it up yet, is good. Sonny's book, Talentpreneurship, or however it's pronounced, is great. Storytelling and lots of good actionable stuff in there.
And his
Sonny
personal
from
story.
IT by Design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. His personal story behind that is super interesting, and how he kind of met people along the way and really did. And I'm also intrigued by like their life by design plan that they have in their company. So yeah, I enjoyed that too.
And not to like give it away, but I mean, I get goosebumps even thinking about his experience immigrating and then hosting an event on Liberty Island with all of the people that he's done this great work with. I mean, that's incredible. You know?
Yeah, I got goosebumps when I read that part too. Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
All right, so you ready for the answer?
Yeah, what do we have? Yeah, drum roll, please.
We have Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek is our top answer.
Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. So that's what we're going to aim for October 27th.
Yep.
I have a copy right there. My daughter read it in college and recommended it to me. So I'm good on that.
Yeah, I have it in my Audible book already, so good to go.
We're all primed and ready to roll then.
Yep. So we're doing the full book before October 27th next year, correct?
Yeah. Yep. We'll do that one in full. See how that goes.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I'm super glad everybody joined. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll get to Leaders Eating Last next.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Nice.
everybody. We appreciate you. Can't wait to see you next time.
Yep.
Phil,
Have a good one.
peace out.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.